friend, it's Carolina Moore, your favorite sewing and quilting YouTuber, and today we're going to talk about making quilted jewelry. We're going to go over the materials that you need, some of my recommendations, then we're actually going to sew up a pair of quilty earrings and turn them into earrings from start to finish. So you ready? Let's get started. We're going to start by going over the materials that you need to make your quilty earrings. The first is some kind of pattern, and I have several different patterns over here that are different options. You can purchase like a pre-made kit like this. There are lots of different quilty earrings. These ones are by Mini Makes. I have not yet made these, but they are super cute. And this actually includes everything that you need, from the foundations to the actual earrings to the frames that these earrings get to put together with. So with this, all you really need is your scrap fabric, and then you can go ahead and make yourself a pair of quilty earrings. So these are totally an option. If you want a little more control or some more options, there are these tiny little 1-inch square pads. In this case, this is a square and a square, and this makes a 1-inch finished quilt block, which makes a super cute little earring. So you can use these 1-inch square pads to make yourself some little tiny quilts to turn into earrings. Or you can use one of my patterns that I've written. I have 3 patterns, Paper Piece Jewelry Volumes 1, 2, and 3, and they include each 8 different foundation paper piece designs. And this is what we're going to use today. So you have lots of different options for different patterns. You can also design your own pattern. Now, if you're going to design your own pattern or use a foundation paper piece pattern that you find online somewhere or one of mine, you'll need to print out the foundation papers. And you can print this on regular copy paper, but generally for foundation paper piecing, the best paper is the worst paper. And that goes both ways. So really, really high quality paper is terrible for foundation paper piecing because you'll want to tear the papers out at the end, and it's hard to tear the papers out when they're really good paper. So you want like newsprint, terrible like throwaway style paper that has a looser fiber and is much easier to tear out. So EQ has these EQ printables, which are newsprint sheets. There's several other brands of newsprint sheets out there that you can use, but this is a great one that I've used for the project that we're going to do today. Also, for the end, when you tear out those papers, a foundation piecing water pen can be super handy for taking out those papers. You'll also want paper scissors for when you're cutting paper. If you are doing not this kind, but one of these kinds where you're basically making a little quilt and turning it right side out, you might want some quilty hemostats. They make it so much easier to turn tiny things right side out. So these are optional, but definitely recommended. When doing foundation paper piecing, I love a seam roller, so we're going to be using this seam roller when we work on this project. And then we want some actual jewelry supplies. So while the rest of this might have been fairly familiar to you, if you've been around the quilting world a while, if you haven't done a lot of crafting, this is going to be new to you. So I have here, these are jump rings, and these are going to be the bridge between our quilty piece and any jewelry hardware. Then, as a couple examples of jewelry hardware, I have some earring wires here, and if you've ever worn earrings, you're probably familiar with this style earring wire, and it would just hook right onto the jump ring to add this on, and then you can turn your little quilted piece into an earring. And then here I have some lobster clasps. You can take your little quilted piece, stitch on a jump ring, add on a lobster clasp, and now you have a cute zipper pull or bag charm. Now, we don't want our earring to just be fabric, we want it to have a little bit of stability. So I like using a good medium weight interfacing. This one here is Pellon's Fusible Midweight in white. So it's 931TD is the item code. 931TD is the interfacing that I've really liked for the earrings. It doesn't add too much bulk or too much weight, but it gives some extra stiffness more than just the fabric. And then of course we need the fabrics that we're going to use to make our little mini quilts that will become our quilted jewelry. And the great thing about quilted jewelry is that the pieces are so small, you can use some of your tiniest scraps. So if you are a scrap hoarder who has been looking for like your vindication and justification for buying all the scraps, here you go, my friends. Quilted jewelry uses the tiniest little pieces, so all those itty bitty scraps that you've been saving, Now they have their moment. All right, these are the 8 different designs that come in volume 1, and I really like this one, which is actually the one that I'm wearing, but I think it's gonna look super cute. This is the economy block. So I'm just gonna cut out the pieces that I need, and I can set the rest aside to use another time. And now I'm going to pick this center fabric. Now the cool thing about the center fabric is that this one I can really fussy cut and decide what I want in there. So like these golden insects, I could have one of these like right in the middle of my block, and I think that would be super cute. I need 3 different fabrics. I think I like the stripe for the outside, one of those insects for the middle, and then I need some bridge between the two. I think I'm actually going to use this blue. It's going to be these 3 fabrics for my little quilted earring here. With paper piecing, you're always looking at the front. So this is the front of my pattern, and this is going to be the front of my mini quilt. And I want to line up this fabric so that it lines up perfectly with that little bug that I chose right in the center. And there are all kinds of light boxes and things that you can buy, but if you're not sure if you are going to love a light box yet, just grab your phone and you can put it right on your phone. Bring up your brightness settings. With a darker fabric like this one, I can actually just take the entire flashlight on my phone, and I've centered that bug. I can see that really well. I want them right there. I'm just going to use a little dab of glue to hold that right in place. And now I can trim up my fabric because it's way bigger than I need, and it'll make my life a little easier. All right, I'm done with my fabric number 1. I'm gonna need some of my fabric number 2. And I really don't need very big pieces at all. In this case, I'm just gonna cut myself 1.5 inches, and that will be more than enough for these little corners. So for foundation paper piecing, I started with fabric number 1 here in the middle. Now I'm going to go to fabric number 2. An easy way to make sure that you line everything in the right spot is that you give yourself a crease. And now you put your fabric's right sides together, knowing that that crease is going to be your seam. Now we want to sew on the line between number 1 and number 2, and we want to start at least 1/4 inch before and at least 1/4 inch after. Now, most people like to bring their stitch length down to a 2, or in this case I'm using a 1.8, because that gives you a more secure seam for ripping away your papers. I generally don't, but for these tiny pieces, there are so few stitches that I want that shorter stitch length because it's going to give me more stitches on that seam. So now I've sewn across here, and we want to trim up our seam allowance. Just going to bring the paper back, and there are all kinds of fancy rulers that you can use for small pieces like this. I like to use a 3/16 inch seam allowance, and this ruler I find is perfect for that. So any ruler that you have where you can find between 1/4 and 1/8 of an inch. So it's a little scant of a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now I bring this piece up. And with my seam roller, give it a good press. Now we're going to repeat this process. I've added fabric 1 and 2, and now I need 3, 4, and 5. And so I can do the same thing. Fabric number 3. Fold it right on that line so I know where my seam allowance is. Add my piece and stitch. Alright, I've made it all the way around with my second fabric, and so now I'm going to grab my third fabric, and I need to do the same thing going all the way around with this third fabric. Alright, with a directional fabric like this, we have a choice. Do I want the stripes to go this direction, or do I want the stripes to go this direction? And I think I want the stripes to go out. I could try to like fussy place the stripes so that the stripe goes right exactly on that seam. I don't know if I want to be that particular about it. We're going to start with fabric 6. And that fabric just needs to be right on that, or that line needs to just be on that point to get this to be fussy like that. And I think it will look cute that way. So I'm going to give that a shot. Just carefully holding it in place so that nothing shifts as I bring it over to the sewing machine. And this is the last, so I want to sew all the way across the entire piece because these seams are the last seams. So from this dotted line here, which is the edge of our seam allowance, all the way across to this dotted line here, which is the edge of the seam allowance on the other side. And then the process is going to be the same. Remove the paper or move the paper out of the way. Cut to that roughly 3/16 inch seam allowance. And I didn't get that quite exactly right, but that's okay. It's close enough. So that was fabric number 6. I'm going to keep going around, adding 7, 8, and 9, and then repeat this process for the second of these units because I'm making 2 earrings. Alright, now that we've pieced our tiny pieces, it is time to square them up. We're just squaring them up to this dotted line here. And now we have a teeny tiny little mini quilt. And this is going to end up being our earring minus a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around. I'm going to trim this one up as well. Now that we have our teeny tiny little insect earrings, we need to pick a backing fabric, and then we're going to fuse our interfacing to our backing fabric, and that will give us the extra stability on our earrings. And we're going to remove all the papers from the back of our little mini quilts. And just using my foundation piece and water pen, I'm just going to make it easier to pull all these papers out. It just loosens those fibers a little bit more by making them damp. And all this should now come out so easily. So even if tearing the papers out of foundation paper piecing is always the absolute worst for you, it should be fairly easy here. Alright, I've cut myself down 2 similar-ish pieces here. And I want to make sure, yep, that the little bug is right sides up on this fabric. Yes, it is. And now I'm just going to stitch 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around, leaving myself about 1 inch if I can for turning. Now, if I would have left the papers on, I would have a nice little guide as I stitch around here. So I probably should have kept the papers on rather than remove them before I did this step, but I was just anxious to get those off. So totally personal choice. You can do it this way and just use the 1/4 inch guide on your presser foot, or you can leave the papers on until after the step and then remove them. The downside of waiting to remove them is that you do have one more set of seams that you need to pull around, but you do have those lines to be able to use as reference as you sew all the way around. Before we turn these right side out, we do want to clip our corners. Now, a traditional corner clip is across like this. I don't do a traditional corner clip though. I do what I call a seagull clip. And I call it a seagull clip because I feel like these look like little seagulls once they're clipped. And it just takes more bulk out. Instead of just taking the bulk straight across, it actually takes a little more of the bulk away without having to get quite so darn close to the stitching. Once you have them clipped, you can turn them right side out. And turning right side out can be a little bit tricky. You can take it and you can manually push it through, which I totally have done. But I find with these tiny little things, having some hemostats is so much easier, because I take my hemostats, I put it to the back, then with my fingers I pinch a little bit of the fabric in, pinch close the hemostats, and it's an extra hand holding that bit. Then I can release the hemostats because they've done their job. If you want, you can use the point of the hemostat to pull out your corners. Now, while I'm recording this, I don't yet have my finished ballpoint turning tool, but I have a ballpoint turning tool that will be available by the time you see this video, and that will help get you really beautiful, crisp corners on this. I want to stitch this closed, and before I do, I need to tuck this seam allowance in on both the front and the back. I want to get this as smooth and as nice looking as possible. Alright, I want to stitch all the way around. That's going to close the hole, but I also want to add some quilting while I'm at it, so I need to decide a quilting plan. I think I'm going to start here at this point, go all the way around, that'll close up this hole, and then when I get here to this point, I'm going to stitch in the ditch around here. I'm going to go over this part a little bit and then stitch in the ditch all the way around the middle, and then finish up and lock my stitches. And that way I'll get it quilted and have some cute quilting stitches on the back, as well as this little hole closed up and some top stitching on there, which will look nice. Now you can decide what stitch length you want to use and what distance away from the edge you want to go. I want to go 1/8 of an inch away, and I actually want to bring my stitch length up to a 3. I think a bigger stitch length just looks nicer for top stitching. And when I get to this corner here, I'm making some slight adjustments and turning the wheel by hand so I get the needle exactly where I want. Our little earrings are done and they look fantastic. It's time to add on our jump rings and our earring wires. I want to make sure that I find the top of this earring because that little bug is directional. And then I want to bury the end of my thread before bringing it up where I want to place that jump ring, which is the top middle. Alright, thread's buried. And then make a loop. And then bring my needle through that loop, and that ties a knot to secure it so that those buried threads don't get away from me. And now, really similar to stitching on a button, I'm using a double layer of thread here. So you just want to go, maybe 4 or 5 times around and around. And you can match your thread to your project however you want. With your last loop, you can bring your needle through the loop to tie off that knot. And then bury your thread ends again. Alright, we're going to do the same with the other side. Alright, now we just need to attach the earring wires. You're going to grab your pliers, and you don't want to try to pull open. You're going to twist open your earring wire. Make sure that you face it so that the front of your project is towards the front of the earring wire and the rest of the earring wire is to the back. And then you're just going to twist this closed again. twist it open. Put your mini quilt on there, your itsy bitsy teeny quilt. And there we go. How cute are these little earrings with those bugs in the middle? And look at how cute those stripes turned out going out. Love that. I love that there are so many ways that you can be creative with this and make your own quilty earrings. This design that I'm wearing is actually the exact same design that we just sewed up. It's just in a different fabric. And see how it looks so different? Love that. Friends, I hope this encourages you to take those scraps and turn them into fabulous quilted jewelry, both for yourself and as a gift for friends, because they make fabulous gifts. You can turn them into earrings, necklaces, bracelets, zipper charms, zipper pulls. There's so many different ways that you can make this your own, and I absolutely love that. If you have any questions, you can find me all over social media. I have lots more videos on this quilted jewelry and more coming out over on my YouTube. You just type in my name, Carolina Moore, into YouTube and you'll find me there. If you type the words Carolina Moore Quilter into Google, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, anywhere like that, you'll probably be able to find me as well. My blog is alwaysexpectmore.com. My shop is carolinamorepatterns.com, but I definitely encourage you to go to your local quilt shop and ask them for any of these products that I've shown you today. Other than things like jewelry pliers, which are more of a craft item, shops will carry a lot of this stuff. Obviously the fabric, the thread, my patterns, the ballpoint turning tool will be available in quilt shops. My patterns are available in quilt shops, and I have a whole line of jewelry findings that's also going to be available in quilt shops. So most of this stuff you can get at your local quilt shop. Friends, that's it for today. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure you've given this video a thumbs up, leave your comments down below, and I will see you right here real soon. Bye for now, my friends.